Italy is underwater again. Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna are being devastated as rivers explode beyond their banks, turning historic cities into drowning zones. This is not just another flood. This is the third catastrophic river failure in 18 months, and what is happening right now has scientists completely panicked. Picture Renaissance streets that survived centuries now vanishing beneath walls of water that appeared in hours. Entire neighborhoods are collapsing as the Arno River jumps 8 meters in a single night. Emergency responders are overwhelmed as multiple river systems fail simultaneously across 2 regions. But here is what terrifies hydrologists. The rivers are not failing randomly. They are synchronized. Soil saturation monitors are showing ground conditions that have never been recorded before in Italian history. The Earth literally cannot absorb another drop. With the Apennine Mountains fully saturated, geologists warn that billions of tons of unstable slopes could give way at any moment. These floods are not just destroying homes and drowning UNESCO World Heritage sites. They might be triggering something far worse. Is Italy experiencing a new climate reality? Or are these synchronized river explosions a warning sign of total watershed collapse that could reshape the entire Mediterranean forever? On January 15th at 2:34 a.m. Central European Time, Italy's National Civil Protection Department issues the first critical flood warning as an intense low-pressure system stalls directly over the Apennine Mountains. Within minutes, meteorological stations across Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna register rainfall intensities that shatter every record in the regional database. The numbers are staggering and accelerating. Florence's Hydrological Monitoring Center reports 320 millimeters of rain falling across the mountain range in just 48 hours. Normal January rainfall for the entire month averages 73 millimeters. The ground cannot absorb the deluge. At 4:47 a.m., the Arno River near Florence jumps 3.2 meters in 90 minutes. Automated flood sensors trigger emergency protocols as water levels spike toward the catastrophic thresholds that devastated the city in 1966. Downstream communities receive evacuation warnings as the surge races toward the historic center. By 5:15 a.m., the Reno River in Emilia-Romagna breaches its banks near Bologna. Water levels reach 8.4 meters, exceeding the previous record set during the May 2023 floods by 1.7 meters. Emergency operations centers activate across both regions simultaneously for the first time in Italian history. The crisis multiplies exponentially as tributary systems fail in rapid succession. The Bisenzio River overwhelms levees protecting Prato's industrial district. The Ombrone floods agricultural valleys across southern Tuscany. The Secchia River transforms into a violent torrent that threatens Modana's historic center. Hydrologists describe the synchronized failure as unprecedented. Rivers across 2 regions reaching critical levels within hours of each other defies normal flooding patterns. Dam operators report emergency conditions at multiple facilities. The Bilancino Dam, north of Florence, approaches maximum capacity as inflow rates exceed release capabilities. Engineers face an impossible choice: release water and flood downstream communities immediately, or risk catastrophic dam failure that could destroy everything in the flood path. At 6:23 in the morning, the A1 Autostrada, Italy's primary north-south highway, closes completely between Florence and Bologna as water surges across the roadway. Traffic cameras show vehicles abandoned in water depths exceeding 2 meters. High-speed rail service suspends operations as floodwaters undermine track foundations. Transportation infrastructure collapses as the crisis accelerates beyond all emergency planning scenarios. Inside the National Civil Protection Department headquarters in Rome, the operations floor transforms into a crisis command center by 7 a.m. Department head Fabrizio Curcio coordinates the largest multi-regional emergency response in Italian history. Screens display color-coded flood zones expanding across digital maps. Phones ring constantly as reports flood in from across Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna. Every decision carries life or death consequences. By 8:15 a.m., the deployment numbers are staggering. 4,200 firefighters mobilize across both regions. 2,800 civil protection volunteers activate from emergency stations. 1,600 police and carabinieri coordinate evacuations and secure flood zones. The Italian army deploys 850 personnel with amphibious vehicles and heavy equipment. Helicopter rescue operations struggle against zero visibility conditions and winds of 80 kilometers per hour. Crews work around the clock, plucking families from rooftops as water rises faster than ground-based rescue teams can respond. Emergency shelters fill beyond capacity within hours. The Bologna Sports Complex houses 3,400 displaced residents on cots arranged across basketball courts and hallways. Florence's Mandela Forum converts into a massive shelter holding 2,800 people. Across both regions, 78 emergency facilities struggle to accommodate 45,000 evacuated residents. Families arrive with nothing but emergency bags. Children are crying. Elderly residents require immediate medical attention that overwhelmed volunteers can barely provide. Hospital evacuations add complexity to the crisis. Correggi University Hospital in Florence transfers 340 patients as floodwaters threaten ground floor facilities. Medical equipment, patients on ventilators, intensive care cases, all moving through chaos as ambulances navigate flooded streets. Swift water rescue teams receive over 1,200 emergency calls in 6 hours. Response capacity shatters under simultaneous demands across dozens of municipalities. Shortages hit immediately. Sandbag supplies are depleted. Emergency pumps are allocated to critical infrastructure. Rescue boats are stretched across too many locations. Thousands of volunteers form human chains along riverbanks, desperately filling sandbags and reinforcing levees that engineers warn cannot hold. Communication networks buckle under emergency traffic. Emergency radio frequencies saturate with overlapping distress calls. Officials face impossible choices: defend historic city centers or protect residential neighborhoods, save bridges or protect water treatment plants. The scope of the crisis overwhelms even the most comprehensive emergency planning. At the Italian National Research Council Institute of Hydrogeological Protection in Perugia, hydrologists stare at monitoring data that defies every flooding model in their database. Dr. Alessandro Marchetti, lead hydrological scientist, analyzes river flow patterns that show something never documented in Italian meteorological history. The Arno River is flowing at 3,400 cubic meters per second. Normal winter flow averages 200. The Reno River peaks at 2,800 cubic meters per second, against a typical rate of 180. But the numbers tell only part of the terrifying story. The rivers are synchronized. Multiple watershed systems across 2 regions, reaching catastrophic levels within hours of each other, violate basic hydrological principles. Rivers drain different terrain, different elevations, different soil compositions. They should not fail simultaneously. Yet satellite data confirms the impossible. 7 major rivers and dozens of tributaries are all peaking in coordinated collapse. Soil saturation monitors reveal the nightmare beneath the surface. Ground moisture content across the Apennine slopes measures 98% capacity. The Earth literally cannot absorb another drop. Every additional millimeter of rain becomes immediate runoff, channeling directly into already overwhelmed river systems. Underground water tables have risen to surface level across 340 square kilometers. The ground is drowning from below, while floods destroy from above. Dr. Elena Bianchi at the University of Bologna analyzes dam capacity data with growing alarm. The Bilancino Dam reports inflow rates of 890 cubic meters per second, while maximum safe release capacity is 420 cubic meters per second. The math is brutal. Water is entering faster than operators can release it without flooding everything downstream. 5 other dams across the region face similar impossible equations. Landslide risk assessments paint an even darker picture. The Apennine mountain range shows slope instability across 1,200 documented sites. Geologists warn that saturated soil on steep terrain creates conditions for catastrophic mass movement. Billions of tons of mountainside could give way with additional rainfall or seismic activity. European climate research centers convene emergency analysis sessions. The flooding intensity matches computer projections for 2050 under worst-case climate scenarios. Scientists are witnessing conditions that should not exist for another 25 years. Climate models are not just wrong. They have catastrophically underestimated the speed of Mediterranean weather system transformation. Marco Rossini watches the Arno River from his third-floor apartment window in Florence's Santo Spirito neighborhood as water climbs the ancient stone walls below. His family has lived in this building for 4 generations. His 82-year-old mother refuses to leave. She survived the 1966 flood as a young woman and insists the levees will hold this time. Marco's wife, Chiara, packs emergency bags for their 2 children as evacuation sirens wail through the pre-dawn darkness. The water is rising faster than 1966, much faster. In the Emilia-Romagna countryside near Ravenna, agricultural engineer Giuseppe Alberti stands in his flooded barn watching 60 years of family farming disappear beneath muddy water. His 200 dairy cattle were evacuated to higher ground hours earlier, but the milking equipment, grain stores, and machinery representing 3 generations of investment are submerged. His grandfather bought this land in 1963. Giuseppe's son was supposed to inherit it next year. 3 generations of the family are at stake. At Bologna's Palaceport emergency shelter, 7-year-old Sofia Moretti clutches a soaked stuffed rabbit, the only possession she grabbed when police evacuated her family at 5 in the morning. Her mother, Elena, a hospital nurse, tries to comfort her daughter while searching her phone desperately for news about her own parents trapped in their Modena apartment. Cell service fails repeatedly. The not knowing is torture. In Florence's Oltrarno district, 68-year-old artisan leather craftsman Antonio Benedetti refuses evacuation orders. His workshop has operated in the same location since 1847. 5 generations of master craftsmen. He stands inside surrounded by tools, leather, and half-finished bags as water seeps under the door. First responders plead with him to leave. He tells them his grandfather rebuilt after 1966. He will rebuild again. Workshop and family history hold him in place. Emergency physician Dr. Lucia Romano works 18-hour shifts at a makeshift medical station in Prado's converted gymnasium. She treats elderly evacuees without their medications, diabetics without insulin, heart patients without their prescriptions. Medical supply chains have collapsed. She makes impossible triage decisions as more patients arrive every hour. A young mother asks where her husband is. Dr. Romano has no answers. Communication systems remain down across dozens of municipalities. The Italian Ministry of Economy releases preliminary damage assessments that stagger government officials. Economic losses exceed 8.5 billion euros in the first 72 hours alone. The numbers climb hourly as floodwaters reveal more destruction. Emilia-Romagna's agricultural heartland disappears beneath contaminated water that destroys the region responsible for Italy's most famous food exports. Parmigiano Reggiano cheese production facilities are flooded. Prosciutto di Parma curing houses are submerged. Balsamic vinegar producers in Modena watch centuries-old barrels floating in contaminated floodwater. Contaminated water threatens heritage foods. Crop losses devastate Italy's food security. 340,000 hectares of agricultural land are underwater. Wheat fields are destroyed weeks before spring planting. Vegetable crops are rotting in saturated soil. Fruit orchards are submerged for days, killing root systems that took decades to establish. Agricultural economists project 2.8 billion euros in farming losses, affecting food prices across Europe for years. Tourism collapses as international travelers cancel trips en masse. Florence hotels report 18,000 room cancellations in 48 hours. The Uffizi Gallery closes indefinitely as engineers assess structural damage from groundwater infiltration. Pisa's Piazza dei Miracoli sits surrounded by floodwater, threatening foundations of the 1,000-year-old cathedral complex. UNESCO officials arrive to evaluate threats to 6 World Heritage sites across both regions. Tourism is grinding to a halt. Tuscany's wine industry faces catastrophic losses. Chianti vineyards are submerged, destroying vines that produce 4 million bottles annually. Cellars are flooded, ruining 80,000 barrels of aging wine worth 140 million euros. Brunello di Montalcino producers watch generations of viticultural work disappear beneath muddy water. Manufacturing shutdowns ripple through global supply chains. Emilia-Romagna's industrial corridor produces automobiles, machinery, ceramics, and textiles for international markets. Ferrari's Maranello facility suspends operations. Lamborghini's Sant'Agata Bolognese plant evacuates workers as floodwaters approach. The region's manufacturing output represents 2.1% of Italy's total GDP, now completely offline. Insurance companies face insolvency as flood damage claims overwhelm reserves. State Farm Italia reports 340,000 claims filed in 4 days. Many property owners discover flood exclusions in their policies, leaving them financially devastated. The Italian government requests 6 billion euros in EU emergency disaster funding. Small businesses face annihilation, family restaurants, shops, and workshops. Generations of work destroyed in hours. The economic recovery timeline stretches beyond a decade. 5 days after the initial river breaches, water levels remain dangerously high across both regions, despite precipitation ending 48 hours ago. The Arno River flows 4.2 meters above flood stage. The Reno River sits 3.8 meters over safe levels. Hydrologists warn that saturated ground conditions mean any additional rainfall could trigger immediate reflooding. 67,000 residents remain under mandatory evacuation orders as officials determine which areas are structurally safe for return. The confirmed death toll reaches 34, with 19 people still missing across multiple municipalities. Search and rescue teams continue operations in debris fields and submerged structures. Most fatalities occurred when drivers attempted to cross flooded roads, catastrophically underestimating water depth and current strength that swept vehicles downstream. Water contamination emerges as the next crisis. Sewage treatment plants are overwhelmed by floodwater, mixing raw waste with standing water across residential areas. Public health officials warn of cholera, typhoid, and hepatitis risks. Disease outbreak prevention teams distribute water purification tablets and emergency sanitation supplies, but demand overwhelms inventory. Power restoration struggles against continued flooding and infrastructure accessibility. Enel reports 280,000 customers still without electricity. Repair crews cannot safely access submerged substations and damaged transmission lines. Engineers estimate a minimum of 3 weeks before full service restoration. Structural safety assessments reveal catastrophic damage. 4,200 buildings are marked unsafe for occupation, pending detailed engineering evaluation. Bridge inspectors identify 47 spans showing critical structural compromise. The Ponte Vecchio in Florence shows foundation erosion that threatens the 14th century structure. Transportation engineers close 23 bridges indefinitely. Secondary landslide threats force new evacuations in Apennine foothill communities. Geologists identify 340 slopes showing imminent failure risk. Saturated soil on steep terrain could give way without warning, burying villages in massive debris flows. Debris removal operations face a staggering scope. An estimated 8 million tons of mud, damaged vehicles, destroyed belongings, and building materials require removal. Heavy equipment operators work around the clock, but progress measures in meters per day across regions that require kilometers of cleanup. Emergency shelters extend operations indefinitely as displaced families learn the devastating truth. 28,000 people cannot return home for a minimum of 6 months. Many face permanent displacement as homes require complete reconstruction. Mental health crisis counselors report overwhelming demand as trauma, loss, and uncertainty devastate psychological well-being across both regions. Historical records show that Italy has faced devastating floods before, but never with the relentless frequency witnessed since 2023. The legendary 1966 Florence flood killed 101 people and submerged the city under 6 meters of water. Recovery took decades. UNESCO mobilized international art restoration efforts that continued for 30 years, but the 1966 disaster occurred as an isolated catastrophic event, not part of an accelerating pattern. The timeline of recent floods tells a terrifying story. May 2023, Emilia-Romagna experiences unprecedented flooding that kills 17 people and displaces 36,000 residents. November 2023, Tuscany floods again with 8 fatalities and 12,000 evacuations. Now January 2026, both regions submerged simultaneously. What meteorologists once classified as 100-year flood events now occur every few months. Infrastructure designed for a different climate reality crumbles under the new normal. Levee systems built in the 1950s and the 1960s calculated flood protection based on historical data showing major events every 50 to 100 years. Current rainfall intensities exceed design specifications by 340%. The engineering is obsolete. Mediterranean climate research reveals permanent atmospheric circulation changes. Dr. Antonella Sana at the Italian National Agency for New Technologies describes jet stream patterns that now funnel moisture from North Africa directly into northern Italy with unprecedented intensity. Sea surface temperatures in the Mediterranean measure 3.2 degrees Celsius above 20th century averages, loading the atmosphere with moisture content that climate models projected would not occur until 2045. Multiple factors converge to amplify flooding severity. Alpine glaciers melting earlier and faster contribute massive water volumes. Deforestation across Apennine slopes reduces natural water absorption. Agricultural practices compact soil, decreasing infiltration capacity. Urbanization creates impermeable surfaces that channel rainfall into rivers at accelerated rates. European climate modeling centers report similar alarm across the continent. Germany's 2021 floods killed 220 people. Belgium experienced catastrophic river failures the same year. The pattern extends across the northern hemisphere, suggesting fundamental atmospheric reorganization. Italian politicians face brutal economic calculations. Spend 40 billion euros on massive new flood defense infrastructure, or spend 200 billion euros on repeated disaster recovery over the next 2 decades. Engineers propose ambitious solutions, including expanded flood retention basins, river diversions, and reconstructed levee systems. But implementation requires years, while floods arrive every few months. Water levels drop slowly across Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna, but the crisis is far from over. Recovery timelines stretch 5 to 8 years for complete infrastructure reconstruction. Engineers cannot answer whether any levee system can protect against the new rainfall intensities that climate scientists confirm represent the baseline, not the anomaly. Italian communities demonstrate remarkable resilience, neighbors helping neighbors rebuild as they have for centuries. But individual determination cannot solve systemic vulnerabilities that accelerate with every degree of Mediterranean warming. Hydrologists issue stark warnings. The synchronized river failures are not isolated disasters, but symptoms of permanent atmospheric reorganization. Every month without major infrastructure adaptation increases future casualties and economic devastation. What devastates Italy today foreshadows threats to coastal regions across southern Europe. The fundamental question remains unanswered. Can human engineering adapt fast enough to survive accelerating climate impacts? The floodwaters recede, But meteorologists already track the next low-pressure system forming over the Atlantic. The threat never ends. It just pauses between catastrophes. Climate change is not a future warning. It is the present reality drowning the Italian heartland.